Let's take a look at our finished layout. On top of our image, there's a lot of text. And if we take a look at the layers panel, we can see that there are several text layers here. And then there are some just standard layers with images or a colored background in them. But let's go back to the layout that we were working with earlier that has the violin in it. Let's go ahead and create a text layer. So in order to do that, you're going to choose the text tool and then click somewhere in the document, and you'll see that there's a blinking cursor and a text layer appeared. And let's go ahead and type in our mostly Mozart. All right, and then we can, I just hit Command A to select that. And then just like in Illustrator, we have some character options up at the top of our workspace. And we can manually go ahead in here and we can choose a font size. And I actually have this font the style that I want, but it's the same thing as Illustrator. There's a drop-down menu that you can choose your font that you want to use. There's alignment settings and things like that. We can move this around using the Move tool. Just be aware that if you are in the text tool and you click, you're going to create a layer and with this blinking cursor. So let's say you don't realize that, and then you go back to the Move tool, you're going to have an extra layer in here. And that's fairly common, that students are not aware that they created a layer and there's empty layers here, and it just gets to be confusing. So just be really careful with that. When you're finished with using the text tool, you're going to want to go back to the Move tool. So get out of the text tool to avoid any unwanted text layers. All right. I'm going to do something here where I'm going to duplicate this layer. So I'm just going to drag this text layer down into the new layer icon and create a duplicate, because I want to just manually visually position these without having to do too much styling in that character panel. And then I'm going back to the text tool and I'm going to delete the Mozart from the original and the mostly from the copy. So now I have two layers here that I can move around independently and position independently, just drag them around without having to be inside the type tool. And if I select both of these, so if I currently have Mozart selected, if I hold Shift and select mostly, then both are selected, and I'm able to hold the Shift key and drag from a corner, and then I can drag these to the size that I'd like. And I actually want these to be pretty large. And then I can click the check to set that transformation, or again, you could double click on the selection to set it as well. And then I can drag these around. Now, one thing that you can also do is, if you have these two layers selected, you can right click on the layer and then choose link layers. You'll get these little chain link icons, and that means that if you select one of these layers, it will move the other layer with it. And that can be really convenient if you have your text arranged in a real specific way and you don't want to accidentally upset that. All right. The only thing with that is that if I want to do some further adjustments on this, I need to go and unlink these. So I'm going to do that. I'm right-clicking and just choosing Unlink Layers. Oops. And let's go into here. One of the things that I want to do also is just make sure, if I'm working with some type like this and it's fairly large, like this kind of a headline or title, I want to just make sure that my letter spacing is something that I'm paying attention to. And that is something that I want to bring out my character window for. All right, so I have my tracking options. Tracking means that if I select several letters, this already has -50 tracking on it. But if I make +200 tracking, it really spaces those letters out. So it's really important to pay attention to letter spacing when you're working with type, especially when it's larger headline type. So I actually liked 50 pretty well. I might want to adjust the letter spacing between some of the individual letters like this, and that's where kerning comes in handy. So maybe I want to reduce the spacing between between the O and the Z, and that's too much. Maybe just a little bit. Maybe between the Z and the A. Let's tighten that up a bit. All right, so I'm just doing this visually, what looks good to me. I want to make sure that this letter spacing looks consistently spaced from letter to letter. But it's really kind of a visual judgment. All right, I'm using the arrow keys so if I select this Mozart layer by clicking on the layer in the layers panel and it's selected, and I'm using the arrow keys on my keyboard, left, right, up, down, to just nudge this into position. All right, so I'm just going to adjust the spacing here, or the size, I mean. All right, so I've got the festival type, and instead of creating a brand new layer, I might just go ahead and duplicate this layer. And let me rearrange these a little bit so they're in order, so it's mostly Mozart. This will be festival. And I'm going to drag this down. Go back into my type tool, double click to select all the text, and just type in festival. Command A to select all, and then I will select the font style. Okay, so Edwardian script is what I'm looking for, and there it is. Then I'll choose a color for that. Let's make sure I'm got it selected. Command A, go into the color picker. Right, and I like the way that looks. This spacing looks a little tight on the script, so let's put it at 0. And then the spacing between the F and the E, I'm going to use kerning to tighten that up a little bit. And that looks better. And I'm going to position this. Oops. And then resize. I'm always holding the Shift key when I'm resizing because I don't want to distort this. If I don't hold the Shift key, I might end up, and I'm exaggerating, but I don't want to do something like this. I don't want to do that. I want to maintain the proportions of this typeface that I've chosen. All right. Now that I've got this, I'm going to show you how to add a drop shadow to these so that it'll stand out from the background just a little bit. So I'll choose the Mozart one. If I click on the Mozart layer and then choose FX at the bottom, and I'm going to choose drop shadow. There are other effects in here that you can try, but drop shadow is one of the most common ones that I like to use. And I just want to change the angle of that. I'm imagining that the light is coming. I'm trying to imagine as if light was actually falling on this and creating a shadow. And I find a 130-degree angle works well. And then what I do is I adjust these different settings here so I can see the distance of the shadow, you can see it coming out. And the spread, let's see, size, I want it to be a little bit blurry. All right, and we can adjust the opacity as well to 0, from 0 to 100. I think 70 was good. All right, and that looks pretty good. All right, so I like that drop shadow, and I want to apply the same drop shadow to this other type layer. And rather than starting from scratch, I can just hold the Option key and then drag this effect onto the other layer, and it applies it to that. And it's harder to see because it's already pretty black back there. And let me apply it to the festival one as well. So Option, and then let go over that that type layer. All right, so to create the rest of your type, you could either duplicate or make a copy of one of the type layers you already have, and then what I might do for the other information is go into Blackboard, copy and paste into the type layer, and then you can just go ahead and style that the way that you would like.